The land was quiet. Open field stretching wide, with only the wind moving through the tall grass. She stood there often, looking out at it, imagining what it meant, what it held, what it had always been. To her, it wasn't just acres of soil. It was history. It was inheritance. It was hers. But then came the trucks. The machines. The noise of engines where silence once ruled. Day after day, she watched as strangers marked the ground, cut into it, dug deep, poured concrete. They didn't ask permission. They didn't even pretend to. 96 homes. Rows and rows of gray roofs and white siding, identical, soulless, stamped out like copies of a mistake. All of it built on her land. And yet, she never stopped them. Neighbors whispered. Why didn't she fight? Why didn't she stand in front of the bulldozers, call the police, shout until the noise had to stop? She didn't. She watched. Quiet. Patient. Calm in a way that scared people who thought they knew her. Because she knew something they didn't. The men who thought they owned the development believed they were clever. They had papers. Deeds. Signatures. Or so they thought. They walked the ground with pride, pointing at what would be the future of the neighborhood, already counting profits from homes that weren't even finished yet. They thought she was powerless. That she was too small to fight. That by the time she realized what had happened, it would be too late. But they had made one mistake. One fatal mistake. The land wasn't theirs. And every nail, every brick, every roof tile, was being built on her trap. She walked the dirt roads they carved through the fields. Watched the construction crews hammer and shout. Watched men in polo shirts and sunglasses shake hands and sign contracts on the hood of shiny trucks. And she smiled. Because she had the documents. She had the history. She had the one thing none of them had bothered to check. The land had been passed down through her family for generations. Tucked inside an old wooden box, sealed in ink older than their company itself, was the deed. The original deed. And when she held it in her hands, she knew time was on her side. So she waited. Brick by brick, house by house, she let them build her empire for her. And the higher they stacked their arrogance, the harder it would fall. One afternoon, as the 96th house stood nearly complete, the man behind it all arrived. A developer, slick suit, polished watch, a grin that had bought silence before and believed it always would. He looked over the neighborhood with pride. This, he told his investors, is ours. But it wasn't. She approached slowly, folder in hand, calm as always. She walked the dirt path that cut between unfinished lawns, the sound of saws and drills filling the air. Workers paused to look at her. She wasn't loud. She wasn't aggressive. She didn't need to be. The developer turned, saw her, and smirked. Can I help you? She opened the folder, lifted a single sheet of paper, and handed it to him. He looked down, glanced at the signatures, the seals, the stamps that didn't lie. For the first time that day, his grin faded. This land, she said softly, is mine. He laughed, but it was thin, nervous. You must be mistaken. We bought this property. We paid good money. For what? She interrupted. For a forgery? For a signature that didn't belong to the person who sold it? For lies written on paper you never bothered to read carefully? His eyes darted across the page again. The seal. The date. The chain of ownership unbroken across decades. All leading, without question, to her. This can't be right, he muttered. It's not just right, she said. It's legal. And it's final. He looked back at the homes, at the hundreds of thousands of dollars poured into concrete and walls, into roofing and paint. 96 homes. 96 mistakes. 96 monuments to arrogance. And she stood there, calm, letting the silence wrap around his fear. Before we go any further, let me pause and tell you this. If you're here because you believe the underestimated can rise, if you believe that silence is sometimes the sharpest weapon, then you belong with us. Subscribe now, and don't miss these stories where the powerful collapse under the weight of their own greed. She closed the folder slowly, tucking the deed back inside. Every house here, she said, was built for me. Every profit you dreamed of is mine. You built me a neighborhood, for free. The developer's face burned red. His voice rose, desperate now. We'll fight this. We have lawyers. We have influence. Do you think a judge will take your side over ours? She smiled, calm, unshaken. Do you think a judge will take your side against the truth? Behind her, workers had stopped working. They stared, hammers frozen in their hands, as if the air itself had shifted. Investors looked at one another nervously, realizing they were standing on ground that might already belong to someone else. She turned and walked away, not needing to shout, not needing to win the moment. Because she had already won everything. And for the first time, the developer realized he wasn't the hunter. He was the prey. The meeting was called within days. The Homeowners Association board sat stiff in their folding chairs, papers stacked high in front of them like shields. The developer stood at the head of the room, pacing, voice sharp, telling anyone who would listen that this was just a misunderstanding. But when she walked in, silence fell. She carried the same folder. The same papers. The same truth. She placed it on the table and looked each of them in the eye. None of them spoke. None of them dared. This land, she said, steady, was never yours to give. It was never yours to build on. And now, every square foot of what you thought was profit belongs to me. The developer slammed his hand on the table. You can't do this, he shouted. I didn't do this, she replied. You did. You walked into your own trap. I simply watched. The room erupted in whispers, voices colliding, fear spreading like cracks in glass. The board members shifted in their seats, some turning pale, others looking down at their papers, unable to meet her gaze. She opened the folder and spread the documents wide across the table. The original deed. Historical records. Family signatures dating back generations. A chain of ownership so solid, so undeniable, that no lawyer, no politician, no amount of money could erase it. One board member leaned forward, stammering. Surely there's something we can do, a compromise, a settlement. There is no compromise, she said. You built on land you didn't own. You lied. You stole. You erased. And now, everything you built, is mine. The developer's face twisted in rage. We'll drag this through the courts for years. Drag it, she said. Every day you delay, every day you fight, those homes sit empty. The money bleeds. The value drops. And when the court rules in my favor, as it will, your empire collapses. Silence again. Heavy. Final. Word spread fast. Homebuyers who had already signed contracts began calling their lawyers. Families who had moved into unfinished homes demanded answers. And the investors, once so proud, now pulled back, leaving the developer stranded in the ruins of his own greed. She didn't have to shout. She didn't have to fight. She simply held the truth in her hands and let it do the work. Weeks later, the ruling came down. Unanimous. The land belonged to her. The houses belonged to her. 96 homes. 96 trophies. 96 reminders that patience is the deadliest weapon. Reporters came. Cameras flashed. Headlines spread, woman wins back land from developer, HOA exposed in multi-million-dollar fraud. But when they asked her for comment, she gave the same answer every time. Calm. Simple. certain. I didn't win. The truth did. And yet, the truth carried her name. The developer's company collapsed. Lawsuits piled high. His fortune drained, his reputation shattered, he became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and law schools alike, the man who built 96 homes for someone else. And she? She walked the streets of her new neighborhood, quiet, watching children ride bicycles on sidewalks that had been stolen and then returned. Families waved to her, grateful. Neighbors smiled, relieved. And everywhere she walked, she carried herself with the calm of someone who had always known how the story would end. At night, she would sit on her porch, look out at the rows of houses, and remember the silence of the fields before the first truck arrived. The land was no longer empty. It was full. Full of homes, full of life, full of proof that arrogance can build a palace, but it cannot keep it. And sometimes she thought back to the moment she first showed the developer the deed. His face when the mask cracked. The panic behind his eyes. The realization that he had done all the work, spent all the money, and built his own downfall with his own hands. She would smile to herself and whisper the words she hadn't said aloud that day. You just built it for me. So if you're still watching, remember this: silence is not weakness. Patience is not surrender. And underestimating the wrong person can turn victory into a trap you built for yourself. If you believe in stories where truth crushes greed, where the underestimated rise, and where justice always finds its way back, then subscribe. Join us. Because there will always be more stories like this, and together, we'll make sure they're told. She closed her eyes, listening to the quiet hum of her neighborhood, and for the first time in years, the land itself seemed to rest. Because it was finally back in the hands of the one person it always belonged to.